We are so glad that you are all here. We have a great lineup of presentations this year. My name is Janine Smith. I am the Executive Board Chair of the NOLA ILC Executive Board, and our chat monitor today is Courtney Stortz, and she is another Executive Board member. And we would like to start today by acknowledging the original inhabitants of this land. The city of New Orleans is a continuation of a multicultural indigenous civilization on the Mississippi River, known for thousands of years as Bulmancha, a Choctaw term meaning place of many tongues. The Choctaw, Homa, Chitimacha, Biloxi, and other Native peoples have lived on this land since time immemorial, and the resilient voices of Native Americans remain an inseparable part of our culture. The New Orleans Information Literacy Collective would not only like to acknowledge and honor the indigenous people of this land, but we encourage our executive board, presenters, and attendees to shift their approach to land acknowledgements and consider meaningful activities and reparative actions to support Native communities. In consideration of our information literacy mission, we ask that over the course of the forum this week that you take some time to support Native authors. We recommend reading a book by an Indigenous author, request a book from your local library, purchase a book from an Indigenous-owned bookstore, purchase books from your library's collections. Purchase books for your library's collections. It costs nothing to rate and review Indigenous books. It costs nothing to recommend a book to colleagues. This call to action is a tangible way to help Native writers tell their stories, take back their narratives, and have their voices heard. These are just a few recommendations, but by no means do they encompass all the ways in which you can support Native communities. We encourage you to continue learning and participating as we aim to avoid performativity and work to be equitable and inclusive of all. A link to this land acknowledgement is going to be dropped into the chat, as well as a list of useful resources that can be found at the footer of the land acknowledgement on our website. And we're going to provide a direct link in the chat to a Padlet that the NOLA ILC Executive Board created. It has Indigenous authors and stories that we recommend. And let's see, so this meeting has been going on virtually for the past couple of years. So I did want to point out before we get started that we have scheduled an in-person meetup. And that's going to be tonight. It's a little meet and greet at the Jefferson Parish Library, the East Bank Regional Branch. And that's going to be, that's 4747 West Napoleon Avenue in Metairie. And we'll be there from 6 to about 7:30 tonight. And it's a great chance to meet other librarians in the area, to network, and there'll be door prizes, some icebreaker games, maybe some lightning presentations. So we really hope that you can make that tonight. And before we get started with our presenters today, there's a couple housekeeping things we want to take care of. We'll have 2 presentations today. They'll each, one will last for about 45 minutes, the second will be 30, and we'll have a Q&A at the very end. For both presentations. And you can use the chat box to the left to let us know if you're having any technical problems and to ask your questions. And we also have the Q&A box as well. Let's see, and we've dropped a link to our URL to our link tree, which includes links to our social media channels, land acknowledgement, and some of the other links that we mentioned earlier. And our one final note, we're recording, so we will be sharing it on our YouTube channel. More details about that at the end of the session. And if you would rather not be recorded, if you have your camera on, well, actually, we can only see our participants, so never mind. And okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. And today we're honored to welcome Matthew Folse, William Buckingham, Katie Bailey, Elizabeth Whitfield, and Caroline Ziegler for a panel discussion entitled Post-COVID Paradigms, Perspectives on the Field from Current MLIS Students and Recent Graduates. And they'll be followed by Danielle Porter of Louisiana State University. And let's go ahead and kick it off to our panel discussion.
At this time, I'd like our panelists to turn their cameras on, please, if you'd like to do so. Hello, everyone. My name is Ariana Lennon. I am the social media coordinator for NOLA ILC's executive board and the outreach librarian at Loyola University of New Orleans. Today, we have with us Will Buckingham, who is a current teaching assistant at LSU, adjunct librarian at Delgado, and executive director for the Institute for Public Ethnomusicology. We also have Matthew Folse, who's a reference librarian at Delgado Community College, Elizabeth Liza Whitfield, who is currently obtaining her MLIS with a concentration in archival studies from LSU. We have Caroline Ziegler, who is the current conservation coordinator at LSU Special Collections. And we also have Caitlin Bailey, who's a current DBES student, research assistant at LSU, instructor, and contract transcriber for the William Bremen Jewish Heritage Museum. Thank you all to our panelists for being here, and I will let you start your discussion by asking you, how do you feel your online education and during the time of COVID has prepared you to work in this digital world where we are providing more and more online services every day, and how have your experiences led you to benefit from this?
I can start. I think the transition from, at least for me, largely in person to then online through COVID to then asynchronous online proved to be its own sort of unique experience and challenge. Um, I feel that in one way, being online familiarized a deep or familiarity with a lot of information technology that you need to get used to, and I think in a modern sort of professional world. And just gave me a lot of extra experience I probably wouldn't have necessarily otherwise gotten until working in a professional environment. So I think that's one way I was really prepared. But also you lose a lot of social connection in the transition to online. That makes it difficult to do things a lot of previous generations I think library workers had of networking and building up, peer relationships in the cohorts that they attended school with. So I think that's one of the largest challenges that I've noticed going through an online education.
Thank you for that answer, Matthew. Would anyone else like to share? Maybe Liza, since you're
Sure.
currently getting your MLIS.
Yeah, of course, I'd be happy to. So I did take a brief break after undergrad. I was in the first wave of COVID-19 graduates in that spring of 2020 from Loyola, and we were moved online rather abruptly. And it was a unique challenge for all of us. I think not only the students but the professors. I think by the time that I that I began the program at Louisiana State University, which was in the first half of 2023, I was pleased to find that everyone was pretty well acclimated to an online environment. And so it was a pretty nice transition. It still is a good experience. I'm in my second year now. But I completely agree with Matthew. I think that we do lose a lot of the social aspect when we are in these asynchronous online sort of formats. But the benefit of being online is that I have a lot of mobility that I might not otherwise have had. And so I'm calling in from Los Angeles right now, and I'm completing an internship that is related to library science and archival work. And I'm making a lot of great friends and a lot of great connections in my field that I certainly might not have otherwise been able to make. So there are positives, there are negatives. I try to frame it in a positive light.
Thank you. Has any of your experiences completing your degree online led you to want to pursue remote work in any form or fashion? Or do you feel like you absolutely desperately need to be working in person and in the physical library building again?
Well, for me, actually, I started getting my master's in history in 2020, like right in the thick of the pandemic, and I was working on my thesis, my master's thesis, and all the archives were closed. So I had to really rely upon online resources for my thesis, and that really has inspired me to get into digitization and online archival work. So maybe I might be working in a traditional archive space, but I'm making things available online for people to view remotely. So I would say that's how the pandemic and online education has shifted my career path.
Yeah, I would add a similar sort of I guess, route as Katie for me and echo some of those same things where so I've been working at LSU Special Collections for about 5 years in a very hands-on position, and that I do conservation work on materials, and I can't take materials home with me. Like, that is all on site. Materials don't leave the building. And so during COVID, we were all sent home, and I was really scared that I was going to lose my job because I couldn't actually do any of my primary responsibilities. But my boss taught me how to do some descriptive metadata for digitized records, and I really enjoyed that work. And it also allowed me to, contribute to the position, right, in a different way. So the combination of skills of having hands-on things, but then living in a world that like prevented you from accessing that, for that moment, really illuminated to me that like, okay, I need more digital skills here that I can employ, so that I can keep my job, basically. And then the other thing too, for seeking the degree during COVID, I was like, well, this is an online program. This is perfect for this circumstance. And I knew that if I wanted to get another job in libraries elsewhere, or be promoted in my current organization, that I really would need that degree to be able to do that. So a lot of the things that I learned in the program, and I think this is true of the first graduate program that I did too, is like you realize the things that were most beneficial to you were not necessarily the core objectives, but things that you took with you from the program afterwards, like, oh wow, this was actually really valuable to me. And I'm still distinguishing what those are as a recent graduate, but I know definitely working with others remotely and doing all of your projects online have definitely added to my skill set in a way that's very valuable to me.
Have any of you found that since you completed your degree online, you feel a great need for digital literacy and promoting that kind of work, because you had to learn all of this on the fly, some of you anyway, and everything became so remote that you didn't have a choice. It was something that was necessary. Do you see it lasting in the field, or what are we just in this specific time period where we're all professionally affected by COVID, that digital literacy is just a trend right now?
I guess I'll go. I mean, I don't think I would view digital literacy as a trend. I mean, whether or not the computers and the systems we use have the staying power throughout, time immemorial probably won't. But, having the ability to critically think and use these machines and devices and the information technology we have is so really crucial. And even if librarians are stuck doing their jobs in person all day, so much of what we do is, I think, also making sure other people from, infinitely far away across the globe or wherever can access the catalogs that we, steward, or the archival collections that we manage. And while it's never necessarily as special as getting to see everything you love in person, curating those environments and making sure that we're familiar with them and can kind of be advocates for that, I think, is super important. Even if digital literacy or whatever that we're kind of experiencing or going through the growing pains right now of adapting to and implementing those ideas and technologies is in a kind of a weird spot, maybe, at least for libraries and us.
Yeah, I could speak to that. I mean, yeah, it's like the trend is, it doesn't seem to be any chance of it of diminishing the trend towards online learning and digital information access. And meanwhile, like in my experiences with Katie teaching at LSU and to some extent at Delgado, like digital information literacy is needs to be a huge priority in that landscape. And I guess as new or early career information literacy professionals, like we have a lot of work to do. Like that's a huge challenge right now, is balancing, the demands of information literacy and like whether people are literate or not, the continuing expansion of digital information access. So
I completely echo Will's sentiments there, and he's certainly at a point of experience that has surpassed mine. But even with some of my paraprofessional roles and pre-professional roles, I think that it's been really interesting to see that some institutions, there's a huge difference between working in an institution that is embracing this change in digital literacy, as opposed to an institution that is maybe shying away from it, either just from a variety of factors. Those could be social factors, those could be financial factors. I think that in the next few years, with this sort of with this newest wave of graduates, I think we are in a really interesting position because we're going to have to essentially be bilingual. We're going to have to speak this digital language while also being able to sort of work in these environments that, for whatever reason, still have to operate in this analog or largely physical way. And I think for me as a current student, I am more confident in my ability to do that just because I have worked in, at this point, a variety of different institutions with, varying degrees of technological reliance. But it is very challenging, and I am very lucky to have been able to work in so many environments. I know so many of us are working full time while pursuing our degrees, and we might not have had the benefit of being able to do that. So that's my take, and it's definitely a unique environment for sure.
When it comes to professional experience, as early career librarians, what do you find yourself prioritizing when you're looking to go to an internship or apply for a job, and going through the entire interview process? Are you looking for them to cater to online needs and seeing your potential employers really centering that based off of your experiences during COVID and being forced into a digital world? Do you feel more comfortable looking for those kinds of experiences, or are you searching for the complete opposite?
I can answer that question. Currently, I work for the William Bremen Jewish Heritage Museum of Atlanta, and I work remotely for them. But yes, one of the things I was looking for, and it started out as an internship, and now it's a contract position for me. One of the things I was looking for specifically was because of the fact that I wasn't willing to relocate, it had to be online. But I also was looking for something that would improve my digitization skills and also improve my online cataloging skills as well, with like metadata curation and things like that. I was definitely looking for something that would improve upon those skills. But as I said previously, I think the pandemic as a whole, not only seeing, the resources that I had to use and how I had to pivot my own thesis, when I was getting my master's in history, but also seeing, for example, like the lack of resources that are digitized and online. I had one of my very dear friends in my cohort. She had to go to Oklahoma to find her resources, and she couldn't afford it, and she couldn't find funding. So our lovely advisor that we shared literally paid for it himself. And for me, as someone who has been, I guess, on the other side of the desk at an archive or a library, a special collections room, like I want to be the person that helps make these things more accessible, because I know what it's like to have to totally change the thesis of your thesis, because certain resources weren't available. And as someone with a history background, I know that the availability of online resources or resources in general literally changes the historical narrative. So there is, I think, a growing importance when it comes to looking for careers and get like dipping your toes and gaining um skills in the digital world.
Thank you for that, Katie. Um, I do want to go ahead and move on to your next topic of discussion. It's a hot button, and we would be remiss not to use this opportunity to get your early career opinion on our current climate as library professionals, um, anti-library legislation, and all kinds of nonsense. As early career librarians, how do you feel entering this field, knowing that libraries are essentially under attack in many different realms?
Yeah, I could say just something to start us off, which is one of the things that got me thinking about this roundtable idea and talking to Matt is, and going back to Matt's first comment today, like, yeah, and that's been my experience too. Like at LSU, like we jumped right in my first semester. I learned how to enter Library of Congress subject headings in Omeka, which was like sort of incredible. Like that was really huge for me. At the same time, like the broader context of learning in a social environment, which is what I was used to, I sort of had the opposite experience of Liza. This was 2023 was my first time doing online learning, and it'll be hard for me to find a way to put a positive spin on that. It's been a challenge. And so I wound up feeling really isolated and lacking that camaraderie with classmates. But yeah, I guess in fall of 2023, I got onto this Discord server that Katie Bailey was running for MLIS students at LSU, and I don't remember what section it was. Like, we didn't have a politics section, but it sort of blew up with people like raising this question, like, what does this mean for us? That the ALA is going to be criminalized. The LSU might lose its, could potentially lose its accreditation, right? If they can't pay their ALA dues. And for me, like having that connection with other students, and I think Katie, and I don't know if other students were involved in bringing that to the faculty, who then like actually responded to our concerns. And I guess, the point that I would make was like, it took a lot of work and agency and activism on behalf of the students, but there is a way to sort of build socialization and camaraderie, even in that very atomized and isolating environment.
Thank you, Will. Would anyone else like to chime in?
I think that I'm sorry, Matt. I would add that as a parent of to elementary school age children, like we've been watching this coming. And especially in Louisiana politics with all of the anti-trans legislation where no, your kid can't play sports with my kid. And it's not okay to have these books in the classroom and stuff like that. This has been happening, you know. I think it's on all of us to pay attention and to be vocal and to vote, you know, like at every election, and to like support our teachers as well and let them know that we support their inclusion efforts in the classroom, even if, you know, the government is saying otherwise. Like we as individuals and parents and members of the community, not just, you know, library persons, need to be supportive, right, of our educators and of our, you know, local librarians too. As librarians and new librarians and students, it's really scary to see the attacks, you know, get personal on your career. And it's tricky too, because you're like, okay, this is affecting me, but then at the same time, it's like how you're still trying to grapple with how exactly it's affecting you, since you're still a student and not necessarily like maybe in the library that is being challenged, or those sorts of things. So it's a very strange position to be in, to know, to feel like the unease and what's going on, to see that it's coming, to know that that you're part of it, but not completely maybe understanding how you're part of it at the same time. It's very strange and definitely concerning. And I'm rambling, I'm sorry about that.
No, that's totally okay. It's kind of the nature of the topic. I'm sure all of us can hold like an entire 45-minute session expressing our worries and fears about the current political climate and what it means for us as a profession. Thank you all for your contribution and your time. At this time, I would like to open up the chat for Q&A. You can post your questions at any time and I will read them to the panelists. Meanwhile, do you guys have any final thoughts that you would like to share with our audience?
I guess just thinking about it, we had the ACRLLA's forum the other day. We had Lynette Mejia talk, and she, I did a lot of work advocating against, anti-library legislation. I believe in St. Tammany Parish, and then at the state level as well. And we also had the forum host Michael Holt, in conjunction with another librarian, give a little talk about how academic and other librarians can help advocate for public libraries and other stuff too. So there's stuff to go out there. I don't, maybe you can email him. He might be able to provide you a record. I don't totally remember if the whole thing was recorded, but there's definitely some interesting stuff. People, at least the keynote speech with Lynette Mejia was for sure recorded. So there's definitely stuff to go out and see about that, and how, she's kind of gearing up for the next round of legislative fights and things. So yeah.
Caroline, I'd be very interested to know what exactly is your role at LSU Special Collections?
I'm a conservation coordinator, so I do a lot of the physical preservation of materials. Sometimes that's as simple as enclosures for newly acquired material. Sometimes it's paper repair of documents, either things that maybe have been noticed, like it's been damaged. A researcher maybe will bring it to our attention and be like, oh, hey, this is a problem. or sometimes it's disbinding materials before they are digitized. Like we did this project with the LSU course catalogs. We had multiple copies of them, and so we disbound them so that they could be easily and quickly digitized. Things like that, of that nature.
Is anyone else working on any cool projects they would like to share?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Katie.
So recently I worked on a research project for the Louisiana State Museum Association. They were doing research on Charles Page, who was an early Black aviator. And so they wanted to get some museum panels done. It was a very quick turnaround. So, but if you go to the baggage claim at MSY, you can see the panel that they made based off my research. And then there's also panels at the Louisiana Civil Rights Museum, and I'm going to go see them in a few weeks. I'm very excited. So,
Is that in New Orleans, the Louisiana Civil Rights Museum?
yeah, it's in New Orleans. Yep.
And it's open now, the exhibit?
Yeah, it is. Yep. You can go see for yourself.
That sounds awesome. Liza, would you like to share now?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. I wasn't even muted. Yes. So, my internship right now at the Academy is sort of, well, it's very interesting to me. But the Academy of Motion Picture has an online digital preservation forum that has to do with, talking all about the history of the preservation of born digital material. Of course, in our case, it's specifically cinema. This is obviously a very new history and a very new area. And over the last, several weeks, almost few months at this point, I've been tasked with sort of making additions to our digital motion picture preservation timeline. It is live now, and I will share a link, but it's hopefully a tool that will prove very useful to everyone. And it is an open forum, and the Academy welcomes collaboration and commentary from anyone who is still in the field. So that's what I'm working on.
That also sounds crazy. Will, Matthew, anything else you'd like to share with us?
I mean, not currently. I mean, I know I work at the Museum of the Southern Jewish Experience, and I know Katie, you also mentioned working at the Brown Museum, so that's sort of something we kind of have common both for Jewish institutions. Um, but no, I just working at reference desk at Delgado Library. You can see me there several days a week, starting next semester too. I know Will probably has more. I know he runs his public ethnomusicology deal, so.
Sure, yeah, I'll bite. And I'll be talking about this tomorrow, I think, at another roundtable. But yeah, what got me into information science and this degree program is a project that I'm working on that comes out of my doctoral research on Spanish folk songs in Louisiana. And we're digitizing historical field recordings, magnetic tape from the 70s and 80s, and trying to build an online digital library with these interviews and the songs, these Spanish ballads that are on them. And yeah, I mean, to me, I guess maybe the one takeaway is like, it really shows how intertwined these two fields of archives, digital archives, and information literacy are, because the real challenge for me is finding the software that we can use to make these valuable to diverse audiences. We want monolingual Spanish speakers to be able to make sense of these recordings, monolingual English speakers, researchers, and general audiences, like in the classroom, in school classrooms. And we're trying to use the oral history metadata synchronizer from the Nunn Center, the University of Kentucky, which works with Omeka. But it's not easy to make it all work and make all that meet all those goals that are really coming out of a perspective on information literacy. So yeah, I'll leave it there.
Yeah, OHMS is super annoying. That's all I have to say.
Oh
I
yeah,
use it for the Bremen job. It's super annoying and very finicky, and I've been battling it for a couple of weeks now. So
okay, yeah. I'd love to ask you if there are any alternatives or how you're making do, but it looks great. Like the websites that people make with it, like you can just Google it and find them. They're beautiful and are amazing, but building it is yeah, difficult. Maybe it's a steep learning curve. Yeah, I mean, Katie, if we have time, I was going to ask you, like, yeah, how do you feel like the work we did teaching that course and also the more librarian focused classes, like how does that inform your work at the Jewish Heritage Museum and these other more like digital archives projects that you're working on? Like, because to me, I sort of thought going in like, oh, it's just two separate things, but they really work together in the work that I've been doing.
yeah, well, I use Library of Congress subject headings every day of my life. And so I'm like very used to that. A lot of our library courses were also more applicable, like especially when it comes to metadata applications and things like that. And regarding the course we taught, now that I'm thinking about it, if you go to the Bremen Museum's aviary page for their oral history project, you will see if you go to an actual oral history, there's annotations. So every place, every person that we have information on, important events and things like that are annotated, so you can see like a little mini Wikipedia definition immediately right there. And I always thought those were kind of annoying to compile, but I understand now that someone looking at this interview might be coming from a non-Jewish background, so that they may not know what certain terms are. They may not know what this word means in Yiddish. And they may not know of these things that to me as a historian seem kind of like self-explanatory, like the Allies during World War II, but you never know what kind of background someone's coming from. So it's not only I guess a cultural heritage resource, but it's also an educational resource. So, but yeah, and making things accessible and very clear to people, I think has been, that's been a great experience learning how to do that in the oral history field.
Maybe.
All right. I would like to, oh, go ahead, Will.
I was just gonna say, like there's always going to be a trade-off between generalizability and like being able to meet the user needs of specific groups, right? I don't know if there's it's always going to be a balancing act.
I would like to thank all of our participants for this roundtable discussion. It has been very enlightening. If there are no more questions in the chat, we will go ahead and end this first session now. We will be back at 11 a.m. for Danielle Porter's session. Thank you all for coming.
Hey, we're actually going to roll into Danielle's presentation in just a moment.
Never mind.
I did want to mention that it seems like our harassment policy link wasn't working, so Courtney's going to drop the correct one in the chat in a moment. And next up, well, first of all, let me thank our presenters. That was really amazing. You had some really excellent experiences, and I loved hearing about all the projects and everything you're working on. So thank you all for your time and being here with us today. And we will go ahead and roll into Danielle Porter's presentation. She is going to be presenting on communication ethics literacy and why everyone should learn communication ethics. And Danielle Porter is currently a student at Louisiana State University, where she double majors in library science and records and information management. And she received her bachelor's and master's degree in communication from the University of Louisiana at Monroe. So I'm going to give Danielle just a second to come on camera, and I'm going to turn the presentation over to Danielle. Okay.
Hey,
Yes, we can hear you.
yeah, hi.
Hey, Danielle.
So first I'd like to thank everyone for coming, and I'll just go ahead and start with the presentation. All right, so the title of my presentation is Communication Ethics Literacy and Why Everyone Should Learn Communication Ethics. It's Communication Ethics, it's a 4,000 level communication course taught at the senior level at ULM, and that's how I came across the course, because it was a requirement for my undergrad. So this is the agenda. We have the introduction, the good, postmodernity and common sense. If you've taken English courses, you might be familiar with postmodernism, but this kind of explains postmodernism based on the research, how in communication ethics is applied, and then we're gonna have the why of communication ethics and its conclusion. So communication ethics, according to philosopher Peter Singer, it requires us to go beyond our own personal point of view to a standpoint like that of the impartial spectator who takes a universal point of view. And outside forces are neither moral nor immoral. They simply exist as a natural part of the world or the workplace. Ethics not only can be taught, but must be relearned repeatedly over time. So the good is the valued center of a given communication ethic. It is what's most important and held in the highest regard. It finds protection and promotion in our communicative practices. Goods are often associated with what's right and appropriate for humans to be and appropriate for humans to do. Every communication ethic, from dialogic ethics to online-based communication, carries or reflects two sorts of related goods. The first is a substantive good that a person wants to protect and promote. The second is a set of communicative practices that assures active protection and promotive good. And communication ethics literacy is the sorting out and discernment of goods that we protect and promote. It requires someone to watch and to learn, because dialogue begins with attending to what is before us, not what we demand the moment our partner in discourse provides for us. Learning takes center stage when we cannot agree on a universal view of the good. The disagreement defines fragmentation, the reality of different views held by groups of persons and individuals. Sorry. And that was the slide. So don't worry about writing any of this down. I'll if you guys would like the a slideshow, just let me know. I'll post, if it's all right, at the end of the presentation, I'll post I'm gonna post my email address, but kind of like just let me know somehow. So postmodernity, if you've taken upper level English courses, you might be familiar with this as a part of contemporary literature. It's often a juncture in human history that challenges the assumption that there is only one form of reasoning and one understanding of the right and good. Postmodernity, however, you might think of it as an era between that's pretty much after modernism, but in the context of communication ethics, it's not an era after modernity, but rather a juncture of recognition that all historical eras are co-present and at times conflict with one another. Postmodernity often offers a world in which many goods manifest themselves in one moment. Identified by multiple scholars, postmodernity necessitates a rhetorical turn, recognition that we persuade not with information, but with value-laden content that frames information. Communication information, understood as situated, invites a different understanding and framing with value-laden possibilities and limits. Postmodernity does not tell us what is ethical. It requires that we know what our ethical position is, learn that of others, and figure out how to communicate our own position and negotiate the difference that we encounter. Postmodernity is a moment in which we openly acknowledge that of all of these locations for communication ethics. So time period, place, and culture have emerged in the human community. Communication ethics literacy is often the call for learning that invites human flourishing in a postmodern era of difference. Okay, so common sense, you might hear the phrase common sense is not common. Well, that is true, but not in the way that you'd expect. So common sense is a byproduct of what we know and what we practice, emerging from the communities we know and the practices we do. It is only common when there is familiarity with the community and its practices. Common sense dislodged from the universal rests within the local, the limited, and the provincial. Common sense is not an innate human faculty. That means that not everyone's, well, not everyone's born with it, but it's more so that no one's born with it. So common sense today requires us not to take commonality for granted. The only common sense is the realization that there is no universal common sense. So often, because for my familiarity with communication ethics, it's often applied with stuff that's somewhat current. It's often applied to internet drama and advertising campaigns based on how we applied like the different aspects of communication ethics in our class. It's not recommended to apply ethics to often like books, television shows, or movies because it would imply that the audience knows what you're talking about, and oftentimes you have to assume that they won't, and you have to pretty much explain the lore or the whole story of often a book. And for my example is that if someone wanted to do a project on Batman, they'd have to read over 75 years of comics books just to understand the full extent of Batman's character. And that's very impossible. And there's no way you can do that in 2 weeks, which is often the time you're given the time to do a presentation on a specific communication ethic. It's just not plausible. So the reason why I selected internet drama and advertising campaigns, because they're often archived online and they're often shared and there's often articles about it, and it's just easier. And it's, unless it's something where there is a lot of stuff behind the scenes. So for example, stories change and because everything's all alleged. So it's more plausible to just do internet drama and advertising campaigns, in my opinion, than a comic book or even a movie, because that would imply that the professor has seen it. It would imply that the um and your classmates have seen it, and it's possible that not everyone's seen like a specific movie. Okay. So the authors of Communication Ethics Literacy, they actually applied the novel of Les Miserables throughout the textbook. And at the conclusion of the chapter 1 application of Les Miserables, they wrote that communication ethics literacy is the reading and the doing of how people protect and promote differing goods in a time of narrative in virtue contention, even on the physical items they give away, like candlesticks, which carry with them an ethical good that reshapes a life. And unfortunately, I have not read Les Miserables, but I do know it takes place during a French uprising in the 1800s, and it's a very important piece of literature. I probably should get to read that soon. So the why of communication ethics is a subject that everyone should learn because it evolves every day and the concepts you learn in communication evolve with them. Just as there are multiple perspectives on a given issue, there are varying perspectives on any facet of communication ethics. Understanding that we are all different, especially with how we communicate, is the most important thing about communication ethics. And I think this is important because even with one of the communication ethics books, which is Ethics in Human Communication, in its 6th edition, I believe, but it's from 2008, but it was still used. It's still important. And it's very important because even with, for example, the human nature perspectives, there's just varying scholars that define what's human nature and which is simply just at the most cursory level is kind of just treating people the way you want to be treated. And these are the books I used. This was the most referenced one. Communication Ethics Literacy, Dialogue and Difference in the 2nd edition. Then we have Ethics in Human Communication, which was the book that I was assigned for my communication ethics course. And then you have Living Ethics Across Media Platforms, which was another book that I used for this presentation. And I want to dedicate this to my communication ethics professor, Dr. Joshua Comer. He made learning about communication ethics fun, and I hope he rests in peace. And he was a really great professor, and I'm pretty sure he would have loved being in this presentation. So I hope his memory has been a blessing. And I have a couple I believe we have some time for questions and answers.
Yeah, thank you so much, Danielle. Yeah, we'll go ahead and move into the Q&A portion of our forum today. So if anybody has any questions, please go ahead and put them into the chat, and Courtney will be monitoring for those. You can also add your questions to the Q&A feature as well. So if you have any questions, now's the time. And I do actually have a question for you, Danielle. I know that this was a course. Was it a required course, or if not required, what drew you into wanting to take this class?
Okay, communication ethics, it was a required course for my undergraduate degree. Yeah, and at first I thought it was going to be incredibly difficult because ethics, it's a very broad and information dense subject. So it's even something that's still like heavily debated on, even at the postdoctorate level. So scholars are still some aspects of communication ethics. There's still debates over which facet of communication ethics is, and it's very information dense. So with Dr. Comer, he would be like, it's okay if you don't quite understand it yet, because it's still like being debated at the postdoctorate level. So it's just understand it as best as you can.
Yeah, thank you. And I should mention, if anybody has any questions about the first section as well, Will is here to take your questions also. And it looks like we do have a question. Will says he had never heard of communication ethics before today, and have you been able to put what you've learned from this field into your life or work as a student?
Actually I have, because I have, but it's often something you don't really think about doing until like after you've done it. I think, for example, I think I'm on a Facebook group about communication, and and around the time where or at least sometime after Will Smith slapped Chris Rock, I kind of mentioned that, hey, this was kind of it's obviously unethical for Will Smith to slap Chris Rock, but given the context of why Will Smith slapped Chris Rock, and given Chris Rock's history with because Chris Rock did a documentary over Black women and why Black women are most likely insecure about their hair, it's kind of like not cool to do a joke about a Black woman who's insecure about her hair because she lost it because Jada Pinkett Smith, she lost it due to an autoimmune disease. So it wasn't very ethical of him to just make a joke in front of hundreds of people, or even like a live audience, to joke about somebody in their hair. And someone disagreed, but it's the internet, so it's a dumpster fire.
Okay, let's see if we have any other questions coming in. All right, well, I'll give it another moment, but while we are coming into a close, I'd like to thank Danielle. It was an excellent presentation. And also to our panelists from the first presentation as well. Danielle, if you want to drop your email address into the chat, that would be really helpful if anybody has any questions or wants to, wants the presentation. And as I think I mentioned before, this will be recorded and put up on our YouTube channel in the near future. All right, so Danielle's got her email address there. I did want to remind everyone that we will be at the East Bank Regional Library this evening from about 6 to 7:30. And that's, as I'd said earlier, 4747 West Napoleon Avenue in Metairie. And we are going to have a really great time tonight. So I hope everyone can join us. Yeah, and there will be finger sandwiches and some desserts and, you know, soft drinks and different things like that. So, and door prizes. Everybody loves a good door prize, right? So we want to remind you that we have our social media channels that you can subscribe to, and Courtney's going to drop a link to our evaluation form to get some feedback on the presentations and like what you'd like to see in the future from the NOLA Information Literacy Collective. And I believe that is it today. If you want to rewatch the presentations, as I mentioned, they'll be on Zoom. I'm sorry, on our YouTube channel coming shortly. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to email us at nolailc@gmail.com. And we hope that you enjoy the rest of your week and that you join us back here tomorrow for the next day of our conference. So take care, everyone, and I hope to see you all tomorrow.